Look at the hoofda. I suspect he would be the biggest bull anyone in my family has ever shot. And he would surely be the biggest bull we've ever killed on our TV show.
Hey folks, Randy Newberg here. Hope you're doing well. Today we're going to do another one of these pivot points, and this one is an Arizona elk hunt with me and my son Matthew. It's probably the one that gives me the most, pain. Did this really happen? But there's a couple pivot points in this hunt, and one is the pivot point of how we found the elk. The other is the pivot point of how I screwed it up. So, go down to northern Arizona. Huge blizzard comes in. I mean, there's trees falling. It's like just terrible. Well, in my mind, I'm like, a lot of these folks aren't geared up to drive through 20, 25 inches of snow, but I am. So where are the places I can go? So there's snow. A lot of these juniper trees fall to the ground, and on the tops, the elk love to eat on them. And in my head, I'm like, there's got to be a pattern I can find here. I know it's late season. I know the elk are in sanctuaries. And I know if I find them in those sanctuaries, they're going to stay there. And I had 2 days to scout. So those 2 days of scouting, instantly, the first point I walk out to, that I saw these sanctuary canyons on my map, I'm like, got to be out here. Boom, there's a bull right there. And as I'm scouting, I'm finding a lot of elk. So that put us in the elk. That's the pivot point that got us into elk, is knowing how elk behave and using this weather situation and being adaptable and ready for whatever weather situation, using that in a way that I was going to have a lot of this country to myself. There weren't going to be a lot of people in there. They weren't going to be trudging through the snow. A lot of them weren't even set up with chains to drive through this snow. So that's the first part. But now, those of you who've watched the episode, you've seen what happened, right? The night before, we see this really big bull, but he's 450 to 480 yards over there. Matthew's set up and he's like, I think I can make this shot. But it's getting towards dark, and the last thing I want is to have the possibility of maybe not a good hit, and we're out chasing this bull in the dark. So I tell Matthew, nah, that bull will be back in here in the morning. We'll get him then. So we pull out and we come back. Well, here's the pivot point of what we did wrong. I saw that bull was feeding to the north, and we were to the south of him already. And I should have known that bull would continue to feed slightly to the north. And there was a bottom we could have come up and come out right on top of where that bull was that morning, and it would have been about a 150-yard shot. But I didn't. I got excited. I thought, that bull, after he's done feeding, he'll probably come in bed right back down where he came out of that afternoon. He didn't. I know that when an elk starts feeding, there's a very good chance he's going to go bed in some other place. He's not like a whitetail where he only has like 10 acres that he does the same thing every day. So this bull kept feeding all night, kind of that direction, and the next morning we saw him up on the top of that basin. And if I would have been smart enough to think this through, instead of just being all excited, I would have taken us over to this rock knob here, and when that bull fed through, Matthew would have shot him at 150 yards. We would have had a downhill thermal because we would have been coming up from the bottom. We had everything in our favor. But I got excited, and I'm like, oh no, he'll just come back and bed down here, and we'll shoot him on his way back to his bed. That was the pivot point of where that hunt got screwed up, because as you saw what happened later in that day, that bull goes and he beds over into the next basin. And Matthew and Brad, the camera guy, are going to make a loop around this way. Brad hands me a little mini camera and I go around this way. And so there's a canyon running this way. I drop down in the deeper part of it. They go around the head of it. And when I come up the other side, there's that bull and a second bull standing right there, 300 yards away, looking at me. Not looking at me, just feeding. And, well, you saw it happen. I put 2 bullets. When I first saw him, so here's what couldn't get filmed, because I'm the only one with a camera. There's this big pile of burnt oak on this slope. You know, Arizona has Gamble's elk, and it had, or Gamble's oak, and it had burned. And it's about eyeball height. And I get this little camera on my tripod, and it's trying to focus on the limb in front because it's only got autofocus. So I move it far enough forward that, okay, I got the bull. He's facing this way from my right to my left. I go get my rifle, and I squat down, and I'm looking for a place for a rest in a shooting lane, and it's nothing but burnt oaks. So I drop down the hill a little ways. It's like, okay, I got a shooting lane. Just as I get a shooting lane, the bull now was turned this way. Now he turns, and he is now in the position you see in the footage that we showed in the episode. He now walks down the hill a ways and a little bit away from me. I know he's out of the frame, so I run back over, I get my camera, I readjust it. Okay, got the bull, run back over here about 10 yards, get on my pack so I'm sitting on my butt, I got my pack in front of me. And the one thing that I, again, in all this excitement forgot is there's a crosswind blowing down the canyon. And so I hold for right here, and it goes boom right in front of him the first shot. I thought I hit him, but then I see him look at the dirt. I'm like, oh no. Boom. But the second shot, right there. Other than this time, the wind drifts it even a little further, and you'll see a little bit of a pinion limb go. Missed the biggest bull elk I've ever shot at. But that's just a sidebar to the story. The pivot point was when we decided to pull out of there, I didn't spend any time thinking about the next morning's strategy. It's so frustrating because I knew better, right? I know that if we're here and now that elk is over here 450, 480 yards and he's already feeding this way, well, in morning, he's going to be even further that way. And he was another 200 yards that way. And if we would have come up, used the thermals, made a bigger loop, and came right up on this rock pile, it would have been like shooting a fish in a barrel. But so the pivot point is sometimes you get excited. Your mind just dances around that night. Boy, we're going to kill that big boy tomorrow, da, da, da. You don't sit down with your map and really think it through. Think about, okay, I'm going to have a thermal. I'm going to have this. I'm going to have that. I'd have the sun at my back because we would have been coming from the southeast. I just flaked out. That was the pivot point. I wouldn't even had a chance to miss that bull later that day because Matthew would have killed him at 200 yards or less maybe right away in the morning. But oh well, that's why they call it pivot points, right? Every hunt has some place where success or failure can be traced back to some critical point in that hunt. And the critical point in that hunt was when I did not think this through the way an experienced rifle elk hunter should have. And the bull got away. Thanks for watching.